Donald Trump has effed this country beyond repair. It's going to take decades to repair the damage that Donald Trump is doing, and I don't think that has anything to do with the population.
He could have bit off more than he could chew. You agree with that?
Well, I agree with that. Just look at his diet and what he eats every day in his KFC, William. So I would.
No, I mean.
I would agree with you on that. William is next up on PTO. Hey, William, what's going on?
Brian, how are you?
Hey, what's going on, William? What's on your mind today?
I just have a question for you.
Sure.
You know how when President Biden was in office, the Republicans always complained? Is there any difference between your audience and Trump as the Republicans were non-stop complaining about Biden all the time?
Well, let's try to get a little bit more specific, because I think that's a very general claim. What did you complain about Joe Biden about? What was it about Joe Biden that you didn't like? And then we can dissect that and talk about it, and I'll tell you whether I think it's fair or not.
I really didn't have an opinion on Joe Biden. I can't lie.
Okay, so give me an example of a Republican that did, that you think is justified.
As a group, the Republicans attacked Biden. As a group, your callers and Democrats are attacking Trump. Is it any different?
Yes, completely different. First of all, Joe Biden isn't a 34-count felon. Joe Biden isn't a liable abuser. Joe Biden did not attack our Constitution and the rule of law. Right now, Donald Trump, as we speak, is breaking our own Constitution and not giving people due process. Joe Biden never did any of that. I don't have a problem with people criticizing any president on policy, right? If you don't like, for example, student loan debt forgiveness, fine, fair conversation to have. Geez, I really don't like Joe Biden's policy ideas when it comes to this, and this. We've always done that as a country. We hold our politicians to account. But I'm not necessarily right now talking about a policy disagreement. I'm talking about the Constitution. I'm talking about the rule of law. I'm talking about a crypto scheme scandal where Donald Trump and his family will make billions off of this. I'm talking about selling Bibles, Trump Bibles. I'm talking about a man who defies our own Supreme Court. It's okay to criticize any politician if you don't like a policy. Fair conversation to have. Let's talk about it. We are simply talking about Donald Trump not respecting the rule of law, our Constitution, or even the Supreme Court. I just think that is a 180 compared to just criticizing Joe Biden on border policy or lack thereof, or anything else that you want to criticize Joe Biden on. Heck, I criticized Joe Biden on some things. I thought he should have stepped down a lot sooner. I didn't always agree with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but they didn't rip up parts of our Constitution. William, does that make sense?
It makes sense to the point that the party who is in power now will always be criticized by the other side. Do you agree with that statement?
I mean, I think that's a very generalized statement. All Democrats are going to be unhappy with Republicans. Republicans are going to be unhappy with Democrats. But I think there's a fine line between not liking one of Joe Biden's policies that he implemented and not liking Donald Trump because maybe he breaks the law and defies the Supreme Court. I think there's a big difference there.
Okay, so there's a difference in freedom of speech criticism.
No, I'm not saying there's a difference in freedom of speech. I'm saying there's credibility, and then there's people that have no credibility.
Okay, so do you believe then from now on that the side that has lost power will always criticize and be negative about the winning side?
No, because that doesn't always happen. Sometimes Republicans agree with Democrats. Sometimes Democrats agree with Republicans. They're not going to always disagree with the other side. I do agree in a general sense that I think both parties make too many decisions based on the party they're in and rather what's best for the country. Sure, I'll make a general statement like that, but make no mistake about it. We are not in normal times. This isn't criticizing a president because you don't like policy. This is about a man who defies the rule of law. There is a difference. Okay, this is a man who charges $1.5 million to have access to him with his crypto scandal. This is a man who has the first lady who doesn't even want to be in the same zip code as him. This is a man who has largely enriched members of his family, including Jared Kushner, who received a $2.1 billion check from the Saudis, including his daughter Ivanka, who received over $600 million in trademarks from China. Now, you could argue that Hunter Biden made some money from Burisma. By the way, Hunter never even worked in the Biden administration, or he sold some of his paintings, but it doesn't compare to the levels that we are facing right now of corruption. This man doesn't care about the rule of law. We're not just talking about policy disagreement. We're talking about a man who is a criminal who defies the rule of law every single day. William, you have to admit that there is a difference there.
Correct. You do not like his character, but admit that maybe one or two of his policies could be good.
I'm sure you can find a few of his policies that might be good. That doesn't mean I'm going to go on the air and say he's doing a good job. And it's more than just not liking somebody's character, right? I mean, we can talk about character and we can say a man that cheats on every single woman he's ever been with, not very good character. It's worse than that, William. We're talking about a criminal. We're talking about a 34-count felon. We're talking about a man who accepted a gift from Qatar, a $400 million jet. These are unbelievable levels of corruption. It's not just about character. Yes, you're right. I don't think he has any character. I don't think he has a moral compass. I don't think he cares about anybody else but himself. I believe he's mentally ill. Yes, you're right about that, but it's worse than that because the man is a criminal. Name me one crime that Joe Biden has ever committed in his entire life, William. Tell me if I'm wrong. Last I checked, Joe Biden never committed a crime.
He was never charged with a crime.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that if you've never been charged with a crime, then you're not a criminal, right? Donald Trump is a 34-count felon.
Right. The only thing I would say Biden might have done wrong is with the money. They're not called when you do over a $10,000 cash transaction. You get reported to the IRS, which I have been before, but they claim that there was a lot of transactions that
who claimed that?
Looked into.
So who claimed that?
His family.
Gotcha. So who claimed that? Where are those claims?
I don't know.
You don't know.
But
so it could have been anybody. So
But,
so if I claimed William, and I never would do this, by the way, because
when you open an LLC and a grandchild
William,
who can't work.
William,
partner, do you agree that that's not possible?
Let's backtrack, though. You just admitted to me that you don't know where the claims are coming from. So if somebody called into the show and claimed that you're full of corruption and that you stole money, you would say you don't know what you're talking about. And if I said to you, well, somebody made the claim, William, so it must be credible, what would you say to that?
I would say that they could be right or wrong.
You would say, well, so you could just make a generalization about anybody. They could be right or wrong, but here's how this country, but William, William,
his family made money like everybody else in government makes from being in government.
Okay, but William, here's what I'm trying to get at. The claims are coming from people on the right that have no credibility because it's never been proven in a court of law, and they've never showed the evidence. Comey and so many of the others in office right now, Republicans, have been investigating the alleged Biden crime family for years. What have they found, William?
He's not been charged.
No, but I understand he hasn't been charged, but what have they found? They've been investigating him for years. What did they find?
I don't think we'll ever know.
Well, you know why? Because they haven't found anything. That's why. Just like when they claimed Hillary Clinton broke the law and there were 8 investigations run by Republicans into Benghazi, what did they find, William?
I don't think anything ever surfaced.
Yeah, nothing ever surfaced because they didn't find any evidence that she committed a crime. Same thing with the Biden family. They're not the Biden crime family, okay? We know that Hunter Biden had some drug issues. We understand that, and we know that. But there has been no evidence that Joe Biden has ever committed a crime in his entire life, and you're right, he's never been charged with a crime. We know that the guy that you voted for is a 34-count felon, William. He has been charged in a court of law. So we can't go on one side and say, because it sounds like this is what you're saying. Tell me if I'm wrong, William. We can't go on one side and say, well, there have been claims that Joe Biden broke the law, and then when it comes to Donald Trump and it's been proven in a court of law by a jury of his peers that he is a 34-count felon, well, that was a kangaroo court and it wasn't fair, but there were claims that Joe Biden did some stuff wrong. That's not how this country works, William.
Donald Trump has declared bankruptcy, whether legally or illegally, and gotten away with it. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, yeah, but that's not what he was convicted of in a court of law. He wasn't convicted of filing bankruptcy.
Do you agree with that?
Well, yeah, he's a horrible businessman.
Multiple bankruptcies.
He's a horrible businessman, and he's a con artist. Whether we're talking about his Trump University, whether we're talking about the buildings that he owned, where thousands of discrimination lawsuits he had to pay out, he's a bad businessman.
I have one other little area, one question for you.
Okay.
And it's important. It's in regard to Kamala Harris.
Okay.
If Gavin Newsom was running against Kamala Harris, and they both have participated in the downfall of California, who would you vote for?
If they both participated, okay, so when you say the downfall of California, that's an opinion. That's your opinion. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, by the way. You're asking me if it was Gavin Newsom versus Kamala Harris, Who are they running against? What are they running
against each other? You can't go against somebody. You have to go for one of the two.
So but what are they running for? That means more to me. What are they running for?
President.
Okay,
President.
if they're running for president, then I would still probably support Gavin Newsom, because I don't think the United States of America is ready to vote for a woman. I would vote for a woman, but I don't think America is ready to vote for a woman for president. If it was for governor of a state, I would go with Kamala Harris. Depends what they're governing.
Now, right, the people that criticize me for not voting for Kamala, there could be a reason other than she's a woman.
Okay, but you weren't able to, with respect, William, you weren't really able to articulate why you didn't vote for her. The only thing you said was that she allegedly had an affair 30 years ago. What I want some policy disagreements or real character flaws, and you didn't really name me any. You called her the border czar. Mayorkas was the border czar. The vice president of the United States is not a policymaker. So I want you to be able to okay, so hear me out on this, William, okay? I'm speaking in very general terms here. If one can't articulate why they didn't vote for Kamala Harris and they voted for Donald Trump, then some people would speculate you didn't vote for her maybe because she's a woman, or you didn't vote for her maybe because of the color of her skin. One could think that. Now, if you come at me with some reasons, even if I might disagree with you, but you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Did people vote against Hillary because she was a woman?
I think one could make the argument that a lot of people did not vote for Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris because they're a woman. Absolutely, 100%.
And do you agree that Hillary may not have been the best candidate?
I don't think she ran a very good campaign. I didn't even vote for her. I didn't vote for Trump either. But you asked me about whether she's a woman. Yes, right. I do think that she was overqualified for the job, quite frankly, and I made a mistake. I should have voted for her. But I think a lot of people in this country, sadly, are bigots. They don't vote for people because of their gender. Now, I think those people are sick, and a lot of those people won't admit it on my show. But I do think there's a lot of people that didn't vote for Kamala Harris because she's a woman. And I call those people idiots and scumbags is what they are.
Do you think Condoleezza Rice would have made a better candidate than either or neither one of them?
Not necessarily. I'm not so sure. Not necessarily. I was never a huge Condoleezza Rice fan, but obviously she's an extremely intelligent and educated woman. There's no question about that. But, you know, the George W. Bush administration helped get us into an ill-advised war. They certainly didn't protect us on 9/11. There are a lot of issues within the George W. Bush administration. I would also ask, why did the Osama bin Laden family get flown out of this country first class hours after 9/11? So there's a lot of issues that I have with Condoleezza Rice. But again, if somebody can articulate to me why they didn't vote for Kamala Harris, even if I disagree with them, I'm happy to have that conversation. But I need someone to be able to articulate, and I don't want to hear, oh, well, I don't like what she did in California as the Attorney General generalized statement, or...
No, but do you agree California is not in great shape?
This country's not in great shape. Would you agree that this country is not in great shape because of Donald Trump? Would you agree?
You're going to laugh at me, but most of the problems I believe in the United States is the population has gotten so big, it's different than the 50s and 60s, and it's harder to control the population.
So you don't think so what do the tariffs have to do with the population? Donald Trump implementing tariffs when people like you and me, the American consumer, has to pay for it. What would you say about people that do not get due process in this country? You can't be okay with that. People getting deported to an El Salvador prison because they have tattoos with no court hearing, nothing. You can't be okay with that. And that I hear what you're saying about the population, but we're the United States of America. We're supposed to be one of the richest countries in the world. He's tariffing the hell out of these other countries, and we're the ones that are paying for it. He said 90 deals in 90 days. How many deals have been made? China's laughing at us. Donald Trump has effed this country beyond repair. It's going to take decades to repair the damage that Donald Trump is doing, and I don't think that has anything to do with the population.
He could have bit off more than he could chew. You agree with that?
Well, I agree with that. Just look at his diet and what he eats every day in his KFC, William. So I would.
No, I mean.
I would agree with you on that. I understand. I understand what you're saying, William. And listen, I appreciate you, and I always appreciate it when you call in.
Can I make one more comment?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Could you tell Ryan, please, not to laugh at his own jokes?
Tell who?
Ryan.
Oh, okay, I don't know which Ryan you're speaking of, but I'll try to pass along
the one that was just on a little bit ago.
Okay, I'll try to do that for you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for taking my call, Brian.
Sure.
Great show, as usual. Number one show on your YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Number one. So, you ever heard anybody, I think what they need to do when Trump leaves this office, if he leaves this office, first thing, he's full of shit. you know, then that's number two, take all his voters with him and just leave, just get out of here. The second thing I want to make is this. What's going to happen is this. I hate when the midterm's going to come around. You know, right now all the Republicans, you know, the Senate and the House are kissing his ass right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. There's a lot of people there's a lot of people that are kissing Donald Trump's ass, but those are not people in other countries. They're right here in the United States. They're members of his administration. Right. Yeah, and that's what makes it dangerous. You know.
But I wanted to add to that, but I wanted to add to my point. My point is this: have you noticed that they're all like that? Are Republicans? Their first 2 terms, first 2 years, they kiss his butt, and then when their job is on the line, then they start to move away from him, so that way they can get reelected again. Have you noticed they're going to do that? Watch, they do that every single time with Bush. Mm-hmm. They did it with the first term of Trump, and they're going to do it again.
Oh no, I agree.
To stay,
I agree.
To stay they're the biggest hypocrites ever.
Oh yeah, MAGA Republicans are absolutely some of the biggest hypocrites that you can find. And I would listen. I'm sticking by my guns here. I believe if somebody like a J.D. Vance or somebody else in Donald Trump's administration now becomes the Republican nominee to be president in 2028, Donald Trump's going to run as VP. That would not shock me one bit. Thank you for the call, Dave. I appreciate your kind words. 702-221-7283. Let's go to William. William is next up on PTL. Hey, William, what's going on?
Brian, how are you? I'm going to kind of take off the gloves a little today. I got to warn you.
Okay, that's all right.
Darlene said I was a racist, so I would like you to ask you, since I am definitely not, if you would put her in timeout for a couple days.
Are you talking about a caller? Well, I can't put a caller in timeout, William. That would be number one. I can't do that. But here's...
do you want me to just undress her on the air?
Well, I don't want you to undress anybody. I don't know what you mean by that.
I'm joking, Brian. Have a sense of humor.
So William, hear me out on this, okay? This is a very important conversation. And for those of you that don't know, I've met William before. William has come into this station before. He's a generous guy. He's a nice man. I think there are a lot of people in society, William, that believe that if you still support Donald Trump now, that you could very well be a bigot. Now, why do people feel that way? And I'm speaking in very general terms. Because Donald Trump is not giving people due process. The people he's not giving due process are people that do not look like you and me. We're talking about brown people. Donald Trump is the guy who, again, has one of the whitest administrations in American history. He did the same thing, 5 years ago. And there's a lot of people that feel like in today, right now, if you still support Donald Trump, then you support the way he treats brown people and not giving people due process. Or when he says to the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by, or immediately doesn't disavow the Ku Klux Klan. So a lot of people associate that with people that are bigots. Now, maybe she's wrong about you, William, but can you understand where somebody like that is coming from, where if you still support Donald Trump, a lot of people feel like you endorse the bigotry and the hatred of Donald Trump. There's no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump is absolutely a racist. When you make comments like, I don't want black people counting my money in my casinos, I want Jews counting my money. When you make statements like that and your father is arrested at a Ku Klux Klan event, I think there's a lot of hatred and bigotry and racism in his family. And I absolutely think Donald Trump is a racist himself. Does that make any sense at all, William?
Well, what you said makes sense, but you should never judge somebody you don't know.
Can I ask you this, though, William?
Know how you always ask anybody,
yeah.
Is there any evidence he's ever been convicted?
All right. So
Do you
William.
have any evidence that I didn't grow up and my grandparents lived in basically very close to Baldwin Hills and not that far from Martin Luther King Boulevard, and some of my best friends have been black.
William, I understand.
Well, I know, and Brian, I shouldn't say this, but I think Darlene is a sheep.
Well, William, hear me out on this, okay? First of all, I don't think you have to personally know somebody to feel a certain way about that. Let me give you an example. If you drove past a Klan rally and you saw a bunch of people wearing white hoods and you made a statement, boy, those people are a bunch of bad people and racist, and somebody in your car said, well, you shouldn't say that about them because you don't know them personally, what would you say?
I would say I have no knowledge of the Proud Boys or the Klan, so I have no opinion and never think about them.
So you don't think
I really don't.
So you don't think if you're
I don't follow, like when you say the Proud Boys,
Okay, but hold on.
I don't even know what they do.
All right, but hold on. If you know what the Ku Klux Klan do, they put on their white.
No, they're bad.
Okay,
they're bad.
So that's my point. We know who the Ku Klux Klan are. They're a group of they're a hate group that hates on Jewish people and black people and minorities. We know that. But it doesn't mean you have to, William, hear me out. It doesn't mean you have to know somebody personally. I'm not going to sit here, William, and say I know what's in your heart. I didn't call you that. People are entitled to say what they want to say, and you have a right to defend yourself and respond to it. All I'm simply saying is, in general, I don't think you have to know somebody personally. Like, for example, Kanye West. You don't know Kanye West personally, neither do I, but I can say he's an anti-Semite because the guy literally sells swastika shirts. We don't know him personally. Right. So, William, do you hear me? I don't think you have to know somebody personally to make a claim that they're anti-Semitic or they're racist.
No, you're right. You can judge somebody that you know facts on. You know how you always want facts. Was he convicted? What's the proof? If there's proof, you're 100% right. But without any proof at all to make a generalization, it's and I could be a lot meaner than I'm being right now, but I will never say anything bad about Darlene.
Okay. So let's try to take the focus away from you and Darlene for a moment. Can you understand why I would call Donald Trump a racist?
Because that's your opinion.
Right,
You're entitled to it.
Right. I listen, we're all entitled to our opinions, right? That's obvious. But why do you think I would call Donald Trump a racist?
Probably because you know more than I do and have some evidence.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I look at the way he's lived his life. I look at some of the comments that he's made on the record. I look at the thousands of discrimination lawsuits he had to pay out in court because he didn't want black people living in his complexes. I look at the Central Park Five. Let me give you one example, William, and I want to get your thoughts on this. So Donald Trump took out a page out of the New York Times and said that the Central Park Five, who happen to all be minorities, should get the electric chair. He thinks they all should have gotten the death penalty. And then DNA evidence proved that they were all innocent. They were let out of jail, and Donald Trump never retracted anything. In fact, he still thinks they should have gotten the death penalty. Why doesn't he do that to white people? Like, for example, 3 white people who lynched Ahmaud Arbery. He never took a page out of a newspaper and said they deserved the death penalty. Why did he do it for 5 minorities who were, by the way, released because of DNA evidence? Why did he never retract, and why does he go after brown people? I think that's a question I would ask you.
Okay, now, Brian, you're 100% right, but a lot of people never retract statements that are wrong.
That doesn't make it right.
No, it makes it totally wrong. But certain people don't retract their statements because in their mind they think they're perfect when they aren't.
Yeah, but there are also certain people that are Ku Klux Klan members. I mean, we can go on and on about, there's other people that do the same stuff too. It doesn't make it right, but they're not the president of the United States, and you didn't vote for them. Do you understand why a lot of people feel, based on evidence and facts and the way that Donald Trump has treated minorities, that he just is a racist and a bigot?
No, as I always say, Brian, you're right, but everybody else is entitled to their own opinion like you and me.
Everybody is entitled to their opinion. That's what we call freedom of speech. I agree with you.
Correct.
All I'm simply saying is I'm not somebody that will just blatantly call somebody a racist unless I have actual proof or evidence or reasoning behind it. And when Donald Trump supports the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by, when he lies and he says he doesn't know who David Duke was in a TV interview when we know he knew exactly who he was, when Donald Trump doesn't hire people that have kissed his ass that happen to be black, like a Tim Scott or a Byron Donalds or Dr. Ben Carson, when he doesn't put people like this in his administration, it leads me to one very important conclusion, which is Donald Trump treats black people different than white people. That's what would make him a racist. Anybody who judges others or treats people differently because of one's color of skin or sexuality makes them a bigot. And I believe we have a bigot as the president of the United States. I can't speak to what's in your heart, William. I don't know. All I can go is by the way you've treated me, and you've treated me with respect, and I appreciate you calling in, and I've met you before. You seem like a nice guy. We just disagree on the way that you voted. And I disagree with your opinions on Kamala Harris, and I disagree with your opinions on Trump.
Please, since sanctions and discipline is out of the picture for Darlene, try to tell her not to judge people that she knows nothing about. All
right. I'm just going to say one thing in return.
Do you agree with that? You shouldn't judge people. You have no idea who they are.
Then, William, I have to ask you this question. Why would you judge Kamala Harris then about an alleged relationship that she had 30 years ago on one of the reasons why you didn't vote for her? I just want to say.
And I told you I've lived in California too long.
What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that have to do with?
Once you get branded in California, that's it. There's no undoing it.
Okay, so you're branding.
I'm just being honest with you.
Okay, but whether she had a relationship with a dude that wasn't even in a relationship at that time, what is that? I'm trying to understand why you would judge her based on that, and you believe that she somehow. William, you believe that she somehow slept. Do you believe that, William, that Kamala Harris somehow slept her way to the top? Do you think that that's a possibility?
A possibility, yes.
Why?
Probability, maybe.
You don't think that that's a judgment?
It's not definite. My judgment is maybe.
Okay, so if Darlene said maybe you're a racist, you'd be okay with that?
He didn't say maybe.
Okay, but I'm asking you, if Darlene called into this show right now and she said maybe William is a racist, I don't think you would be okay with that.
No, but if that is her opinion, I'm not going to judge her. I'm just going to say that you shouldn't judge people without knowing them.
Okay, but William, I'm giving you the same. I want you to give the same to Kamala Harris. You're saying that there's a possibility that she might have slept her way to the top when there's no evidence to prove that. She was duly elected twice as the Attorney General of San Francisco. Her sleeping with a man, to me, has no bearing on people voting for her. She also became an elected senator and a vice president. So all I'm saying is, if you don't want people to judge you, I would say you probably shouldn't judge others either. I mean, is that fair what I'm asking you? Is that fair?
But, Brian, mine is it's the appearance, not the act.
So what's the appearance? Help me understand.
But she might have. If I told you some stories how people get on the news channels in Las Vegas, you wouldn't believe me, the women.
Well, I
got 3 people tell me stories.
I can't speak
so you get a little warped.
I can't speak to that. All I can simply say is,
Right.
There are a lot of people that feel like that if people still support Donald Trump, it could appear that they might be racist. It could appear that they might not want brown people in this country. It could appear that they might never want a woman to be the president of the United States. It could appear that way. It doesn't mean everybody is, but it could appear that way. But you say, you want facts, right? Okay, understandable. You want facts. The fact of the matter is that there's no evidence that Kamala Harris slept her way to the top. She's a college-educated woman. She passed the bar. She became an attorney. She was elected, by the way. Nobody gave her the job as attorney general. That's an elected position. It'd be one thing if she slept with a dude that gave her a job, but we know that she didn't. You can't do that when you become attorney general. You have to be elected into that position.
I did not say that. I said there's the appearance. You know how a conflict of interest, it doesn't matter if it's true.
Well, would you say it's a conflict of interest that Jared Kushner got $2.1 billion from the Saudis, that Ivanka Trump made $500 million in Chinese trademarks, that Donald Trump was just charging $1.5 million to get access to him at a crypto dinner? What do you think the appearance is of that?
100%, it could not be right, possibly.
Okay, I would agree. Or a $400 million gift from Qatar. I mean, I just, all I want is consistency with everybody. That's all I'm saying. I just want consistency with everybody. I believe Donald Trump is a racist. I believe Donald Trump is a bigot. I can give you a number of reasons why. And I can only come to the conclusion that people that support him are either ill-informed or they don't care.
That could be true.
So, do you care? I guess that's my question.
You know I care about other people.
Okay, so I'm gonna take your word on that. Then would you say it could be that you're ill-informed on the things that Donald Trump has done and said in his life?
I may not know as much as I should for being 70.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, William, I appreciate you calling in.
Hey, Brian, how you doing, buddy?
What's up?
You had mentioned in the last caller. In fact, I think he's from the same area I'm from in L.A., the Baldwin Hills area. But anyway, you had mentioned something about being consistent. Mm-hmm. And I was interested because Barack Obama, from what I understand, he deported, about 3 million illegals from the country when he was in office. Am I not correct on that?
Yeah, but what does that have to do with what's going on right now?
Okay, well, I was wondering how many of those 3 million had hearings before they were deported.
Okay, so I'll answer that question and simply put with another question, which is very simple. Were any of those people deported to maximum security prisons in El Salvador, one of the highest maximum security prisons in the world? And were any of those people deported and sent to those prisons because of tattoos? Is that?
No.
Okay,
but all the people that are being deported are not going to the the prison in Salvador.
Okay. So my understanding is the people that were deported under Barack Obama did have hearings, and they weren't being separated from family members without due process. So yes, to answer your question,
So all 3 million people that he had deported had hearings.
my understanding is all those people had due process. Yes, if you could find me evidence to the contrary,
Okay,
if you can find me evidence.
Obviously, you don't know the answer to the question.
No, I do.
And
I
you
just
said
no.
whatever
Herb,
came to the top
Herb,
of your goddamn
Herb.
head.
Okay,
and
Herb.
you're wrong.
Herb.
You're wrong, Brian.
Okay, Herb, I need you to listen. This is why, first of all, and then he hung up the phone. So Herb is a coward. There is no evidence to suggest that any of those people that Barack Obama deported did not have due process. I just answered his question directly, and I said if there's any evidence to prove otherwise, then I'll gladly listen to it. There is no comparison between Barack Obama or Joe Biden's deportations and Donald Trump's deportations. You see, Donald Trump is not giving people due process. Donald Trump is deporting people without a hearing, without due process. There is no evidence to suggest that Barack Obama did that. Period. I just answered his question directly, but because Herb is not smart enough to understand the difference, he hangs up the phone, he swears at me. That is who Herb is. But Herb is your typical uneducated MAGA supporter. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He plays whataboutism. If people can show me those who have been deported that did not get due process under Barack Obama and Joe Biden, I would listen to it, and I would also say that that would be wrong. There is no evidence to suggest that, and Herb is wrong. But Herb doesn't want to hear facts because he voted for Donald Trump, one of the guys that, again, time and time again lies, and Herb believes it because Herb, with all due respect, does not sound like a very intelligent person. But that is Donald Trump's base. I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and they would still support me. If Donald Trump decided to deport every person of color in this country with no due process, Herb probably would still support Donald Trump.